Hello and welcome to Nostalgic Nuggets. Today I'd like you to cast your mind back to the 1920s, before all of these buildings were here. In those days, there was an open-air theatre. In those days, right here was the Olympia Theatre. But that's not what we're talking about today. Follow me. Come on. It's up here, but before we get there, Vinny, take a second. I want to tell you something about architecture. You know, your granddaddy knows a lot about architecture. Well, there was a type of architecture that started just before World War I called Art Deco. Now, Art Deco was a style that lasted right up until the 40s, but the first examples that were international happened in the 1920s. Indeed, if you look at Wikipedia, you find that almost every Art Deco building in Australia was built in the 1930s. So, we've got a bit of a nostalgic nugget question for everyone. How, if Art Deco was only really popular in France and parts of Europe in the 1910s and early 1920s, how did this style of architecture arrive in Gympie? So, what has Art Deco got to do with Gympie? And what has this building got to do with Art Deco? And what is the significance of the history of this building? Why is it one of the very few heritage-listed toilets in Australia? Let me tell you. In 1920, a very famous person visited Gympie. He was then the Prince of Wales, Edward. He became king, King Edward. And I believe that at the time, something significant needed to be done about public toilets in Gympie. And indeed, at that time, this building was built. One of the very first Art Deco buildings built in Australia. If you look on Wikipedia, you'll notice that most of the Art Deco buildings were built in the 30s, a few in the 20s, but not many in 1920. So, based on that, let's go this way. We'd like to conclude this nostalgic nugget by sitting on the throne fit for a king.